Hi guys, my name is Jacqueline. I'm here to give you some information about the upcoming eclipse season. The eclipse that we're walking through right now starts on October 14th, ends October 28th. The point of this video is just to give you some basic information about eclipses, how astrologers view them, what kind of events we can expect in our lives, what we're walking through right now. I'm sure most of you have noticed this week has been pretty intense. The month of October is expected to be pretty intense and probably has been for you since about the 1st. But intense is not always bad. A lot of times what we will get at this point, which is the solar eclipse point, the beginning, is new information or new events that change our direction drastically, change our plans drastically. Depending on what your rising sign is, that will determine what this eclipse is bringing for you. So we'll go over that a little bit later. I just want to give you the basics about this particular eclipse and what's happening. Eclipses run on a cycle. This eclipse is on the Libra Aries axis. That means that what we're looking at is Libra Aries related issues. With Libra Aries, it's self versus relationship. So I may be behaving in a way that is somewhat selfish, or I may be overemphasizing my relationship and putting it too much before myself. It's about that balance between self and who I relate with. Most of the time, it's whoever my person is. An eclipse on the Libra Aries axis is often going to be about relationships. Libra rules relationships. Can also affect justice, laws, partnerships, contracts. And the Aries piece of that is how am I honoring myself in my relationships? This can bring up issues of codependency. This can bring up issues of selfishness. We do not all go into divorce mode or breakup mode every time there is an eclipse in Libra or an eclipse in Aries. However, changes are likely to occur that have to do with my relationships. I may start marriage counseling. I may start a new relationship. And the start of that relationship might be the final letting go of an old relationship. There's a lot of different ways that this can manifest. This picture behind me, this is the chart of the eclipse. So you can see where the sun and the moon, I'm going to try and point that out. Okay, you can see where the sun and the moon are both at 21 degrees. And right next to it, that thing right there, that is that upside down horseshoe looking thing. That's the south node. So the eclipse that we're having on the 14th, it's a solar eclipse. We know it's a solar eclipse because both the sun and the moon and the south node are in the same sign. This can also happen if it's the north node in the same sign. So basic information about eclipses. Solar eclipses are new beginnings. Generally, they are new beginnings that we were not planning for. It's a surprise. Once we choose a direction during an eclipse season, it's like there's no going back. If you try to go back to where you were, it's just not going to happen. That other option just won't be there for you. You can think of this as like if you have a relationship where you're breaking up every so often, if a breakup happens during an eclipse, that's the last one, like you're done. And even if you try to change your mind, it's just over. Like now they've moved to another state, or you've moved to another state, and it's just not possible anymore. And like I said before, it's not always about relationships. It can be about contracts. It can be about justice, how we see justice. It can be about the law. If you're involved with some type of court case, this would definitely play a role in that court case. That might look like pushing it along faster. It may feel like you're dragging your feet, like there's just no end in sight, and then all of a sudden there is. Be prepared for that. We will often experience an intense clearing of energy as we're moving towards that new beginning. This eclipse will be more significant to you if the moon plays a more significant role in your chart. Some of the easier ways to know if that's you or not is if you have well aspected or in a significant spot of your chart, or if you were born at night. All of these things can make the moon more important. If you happen to be born during an eclipse season or on an eclipse, then anytime there is an eclipse of any kind, whether it's solar or lunar, that's going to be more significant for you. If right now is your nodal return, that means that you have the North Node in Aries in your birth chart. When you were born, the North Node was in Aries. Then obviously this one is going to be more significant anytime we have a planet or the nodes returning to where they were when we were born. That's kind of the universe's like wake up call, like, hey, pay attention to this. This is important. This relates specifically to you. There's also something called a nodal reversal. For instance, if you have the North Node in Libra and the South Node in Aries, right now they're reversed from where they were when you were born, but they're along that same axis, so it's still significant for you. Some of the other aspects that are happening as this eclipse happens that will play a role. Two planets that will be in aspect to each other are Mars and Saturn. Mars will be going into Scorpio. That's Mars right there. Mars is at 1 degree of Scorpio, and Saturn, you can't really see Saturn, but that 0 degree Pisces, that's where Saturn is right now. So Saturn and Mars are making a pretty tight trine aspect to each other within 1 degree. Mars is in the sign that it rules in Scorpio, and Saturn is in a sign that it's not too thrilled to be in. Pisces is a very dreamy sign, and Saturn is a very to the point, authoritative type of planet. So those two energies are not naturally aligned. Saturn's not in its detriment or anything in Pisces, so not horrible. But we've had a week of fighting, right? Like just fights everywhere. Wars escalating, terrorist attacks. In our own government, you can't get along to even do your basic job. There's just a lot of fighting going on right now. Mars, obviously, planet of war. Saturn, planet of government, of the rules, of the rulers. Them being in tight aspect like that, it's like they're butting heads. Then you might also see down here, that's Pluto, that funky looking one. Looks like he's got his hands up. Actually, I never thought of that before. It's kind of what we need to do when we're having a Pluto transit is just surrender to it, like hands up. Like you're not going to win if you try to fight Pluto, so you might as well just surrender and hang out for a while and watch and learn about letting go, because that's the major lesson of that planet. Pluto in Capricorn, right down there, is squaring those nodes right there. So you can see that's at 24 degrees. That's the South Node. Pluto's at 27 degrees. That's a square. Opposite side, you have the North Node at 24 degrees of Aries. Pluto is making a square to both. That's a pretty intense energy to have during an eclipse. Pluto being in Capricorn, as I'm sure a lot of you know, for the last 12, 13 years, we've been dealing with Pluto being in Capricorn and really pulling back the curtain on corruption and problems with government in general. Secrets, how power is being abused in government. And Pluto is squaring the nodes as they are on the Libra Aries axis of selfishness versus relating. What serves me versus what serves the belief in justice, and what do I believe about justice and the law, and how important I consider that, and what changes might need to be made in laws, whether that's locally or in my own life. Maybe changing my attitude towards laws, rules in general. So that is a very intense energy that's shaking things up in those areas. For some of us, how this transit is affecting everyone on the planet, that may feel personal to us. For others, this might be something that's more literally in your individual life, through the people that you know, through your family, and sometimes that's much more internal. Another transit happening during this eclipse is Saturn opposite Venus. Venus also is about relationship. So you've got a lot of relationship tension. A lot of that is around what we believe about relationships. And those beliefs changing, whether that's because of changes that are happening in my own life or the changes that I see happening around me in my environment. Whatever's bringing it on, whatever's putting it in front of you, it's asking for change. It's asking for something different. But it's not asking in a gentle way. This is very uncomfortable energy. The trick for us is to be less reactive to how intense it feels and give it time to play out before we pass judgment. Pluto can be a harsh judge, more like I'm going to hit you upside the head with my power. And Saturn is just judgy in general. Sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly. Just depends on how you see it. But our ideas around relationships, bottom line, may be changing. We might be okay with that. Some of us might not be okay with that. The South Node is making an aspect to Neptune. It's not one of the major aspects, but it's tight. And so I see it as important. It's making what is called a quincunx aspect, which is 150 degrees. But Neptune dissolves everything that it touches, especially in tight aspect, and it can bring confusion. So when you have all of those energies working together, you've got massive change. You've got surprises that, things that weren't planned. They might be new beginnings. Maybe they're good for me, but I didn't plan this and I'm not really sure what to do with it. It feels very intense right now. I feel restricted by some of the intensity. And with Neptune involved, I may also feel misunderstood. And Mars being involved in all of this can make me feel angry that I'm being misunderstood or invalidated. Neptune, again, dissolves everything. So if that's hitting a really personal part of your chart, you can feel like I am what's being invalidated. And that, Mars, pisses me off. We want to take a breath. This is definitely not a reactive time. This is a process at first kind of time. We can see what's being offered and we can take action once all of the information is in front of us. And eclipse season means all of the information isn't there until after the 28th. Feel free to wait until after that to react if you can, or to respond, to take action. It's an intense time. It's okay to just sit back and let it wash over you. Figure out how you really feel about it before jumping in with both feet. It's possible that the action that needs to be taken, like you'll be pushed through it. And if that's the case, again, you want to let go and just allow that pushing through or the immediacy of whatever event shows up for you. Allow it to be there. It's going to be there anyway, whether you allow it or not. You can resist it, then you're just going to be really uncomfortable. Rather than be uncomfortable, just allow whatever's new and coming and pushing you to push. Just, okay, I guess that's the way I'm going. And if there's something that you want to add to it, if you want to make this more yours, that's something you want to do in November. Not right now. Right now, you just want to observe. Be the observer. All right. So how this is affecting us individually, determined by what your rising sign is. If you have Libra rising, this eclipse is happening in your first house. It may feel like you are the eclipse. So this might look like changes in your appearance, changes in your immediate environment. And if you have Libra rising, likely relationships are very important to you. So there may be changes in how you're showing up to relationships, like changes happening that you're not recognizing as affecting your relationship. And this may kind of bring to the surface that, yes, it is affecting your relationship. And that might be a conversation that you need to have or something you want to just bring attention to, whether it's building awareness around it or having compassion for the person in your life that this is affecting, or how you affect relationships in your life, whatever that might mean. It doesn't mean that all the time we're trying to bring chaos to others. It just means that right now the universe is using you to do it. So there could be things happening in your life that are not, like I said, not your plan, not initiated by you, but they're happening either way. Pretending that they're not doesn't help anything. So there might be some type of new perspective or new way that you're going to look at this, react to this. Gratitude might be a good way to go. If you have Scorpio rising, the eclipse is in your 12th house. The 12th house is secrets, sometimes hospitals or institutions. It can be treatment, like some type of treatment center. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to treatment, but you might have a loved one who's in treatment. Might be something that's coming up a lot or feels like it's coming up a lot in your life. A lot of times these eclipses, given that they're going through houses, they might not be about you specifically, but they are about a certain part of your life that you feel drawn to pay more attention to right now. That's what it's for. So go with that. So Scorpio, 12th house, secrets, sometimes betrayal, sometimes enemies, also sometimes just what I'm not seeing, things that I'm not seeing or things that I haven't seen. And then the eclipse comes and I'm like, oh my gosh, how long has that been happening? If you have Sagittarius rising, the eclipse is going through your 11th house. This is your friends, your community, who you consider your community. It would look like the community that you align yourself with may change, may shift. You may be invited to another community. You may be compelled into another community. This can also be ideals, your goals, like your lifetime aspirations. The events of this month or this time may change those things for you, may change your perspective on those things. This can also be fans. So if you are a fan of somebody or if someone is a fan of you, this is affecting that dynamic. Maybe you'll meet someone you've been a fan of for a very long time, like if you get to go backstage, or maybe you'll just run into somebody that you have really looked up to from afar for a long time. You have Capricorn rising. This is happening in your 10th house. This is your career, your public persona, the way other people see you. It is your public life. So it is the things about you that you do not consider private that you allow the rest of the world to see. And if there's a shift in the way that I allow others to see me, That might look like I recognize that there's a part of me that I'm sort of putting out into the universe, or that I'm putting out at work that isn't really me, and I don't want to do it anymore because it's uncomfortable. Or there may be a career that you're in that you recognize is not for you, and that may be shifting. You may have a new opportunity where career is concerned. This career shift was not planned by you. So that's how you'll know it's the eclipse bringing this into your life. Just because you didn't plan it doesn't mean you're not ready. So consider that before you make any decisions about whether to go with that or reject that in any way. Also, remember, once you go, there won't be any going back. You accept that shift and you kind of walk through that door. There's no going back to your old career. If you have Aquarius rising, this is happening in your ninth house. Ninth house can be your in-laws. It's your beliefs. And depending on the individual person, beliefs are different. For you, beliefs might be religious. For another person, religion has nothing to do with it. Your ninth house can also be long distance travel, education, like higher education. And it can look like you becoming the teacher. If you accepted a role in some type of higher education, this doesn't always mean universities. It's additional learning, like not our foundational learning that we have as children that most of us just have to do. This is more education that I choose. So whether that's at a traditional university, or that's doing some type of, can be an online seminar, it can be an in-person seminar, it can be taking a class, not necessarily towards a degree, just something that I'm interested in or that I think would help me in the career that I'm in. And again, you could be teaching that class or you could be taking that class. But if you find yourself just sort of pushed in to a situation like that, that's the eclipse. If you have Pisces rising, this is happening in your 8th house. It's likely that something will happen that will remind you of your own mortality as well as the mortality of others. This does not mean someone will die at all. It can be something as simple as, like, you watch something on television, but for whatever reason, it hits you really hard. Or you hear a story about someone, like I have this friend who has a cousin that normally you would only have here, but for some reason, like, you hear it, it's intense for you today. This could also be taxes, bills coming due. When you have a significant transit to the 8th house, it's a good time to do any kind of trauma or shadow work, because the 8th house is very not easily accessible to us. So having eclipse energy in there sort of uproots things. If you were thinking about doing some type of shadow work, an eclipse can help shake things up enough so to make that process a little bit easier. So it's not so much like pulling teeth. It feels more organic. If you have Aries rising, eclipse is happening in your 7th house, and you are exactly the person that I'm talking about with the Aries Libra axis and this being significant for you. You want to be looking at how I show up in relationships, how my presence, the decisions that I make, what I do, how I act, how is that affecting the primary relationships, the most important relationships in my life. If you have Taurus rising, this is happening in your 6th house. This is about your health. If you were already, let's say, for instance, if you were working on some kind of health routine, this is going to bring more information. It might shift your direction. It might bring a new opportunity for like a trainer or a nutritionist, or you might hear something that is just like that puzzle piece I really needed to kind of put this whole thing together. In the 6th house, it's very connect the mind, the body, the feelings. It's very holistic. So there may be a piece that you feel like is missing. Like, I've got, my diet's doing really well. You're eating healthy, balanced food that's good for your body. Like, you might just feel like you're on with that. The workout part of your health routine is not doing as well. Or maybe you're not getting enough rest. But just look for what is the piece that might be missing. What's coming to me, what's sort of dropping in my lap that says, yeah, do this now. Pay more attention to this, where your health is concerned. It can also be the health of others. It can also mean the health of others brings like a final piece for you. That may be that someone got ill or they had been ill and they had something treated. Like, maybe you knew somebody who had tendonitis and thought they had a pulled muscle or something. And you're like, oh my gosh, maybe that's what I had, in my elbow or whatever. If you have Gemini rising, this is your 5th house. This is a great time for inner child work. You may see new information where your own children are concerned or the children in your life are concerned. If you're a teacher, this could be children that you work with. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get pregnant or adopt a child. And, you know, if that's what you want, it won't block that. But just because it's going through your fifth house does not mean that you have to get pregnant. If you are not trying to have children right now, would be a good time to make sure that you're really extra careful. An eclipse through your fifth house can definitely help with getting pregnant. So if that's not what you want, just be extra cautious. If you have Cancer rising, the eclipse is in your fourth house. Fourth house is your home and your private life. You may feel that a part of your private life is exposed that you were not planning on, obviously, or that you're not comfortable with. The lesson there could be about boundaries, or it could be about being more vulnerable. Maybe you're not comfortable with it, but maybe it's healthy for you. We all have a balance that we're trying to achieve between being vulnerable and not being an oversharer who dumps all their stuff on everyone. Like, I mean, that's an extreme, but I don't want to be bound. Everything is my private life. And I don't want to be completely exposed where nothing is my private life, and finding that balanced, vulnerable place in between where I am vulnerable with people I love and trust and not with people that I don't love and trust, because I don't owe that to everyone. Something may come up for you around that. If you have Leo rising, this is in your third house. The eclipse is transiting your third house. This can be about your siblings, communication in general, any kind of communication. This is your primary learning, and this is your like daily activities, like your daily chores, your daily routine. So what does your routine look like? Is there something in your routine that needs to go, something you need to begin? This eclipse would be showing you something in that area. And if you have Virgo rising, this is in your second house. It's likely money. There could be a new opportunity that has to do with making more money or changing your financial situation in some way. Money is not always about dollar signs per se. It can be the things that I spend my money on. So I may suddenly recognize that there is something that I really want to purchase. Maybe there's a lot of money that has come in recently, and I'm sure that this purchase is what I want. And a week ago, it had never even crossed my mind, but now I feel like that's absolutely what I want to spend my money on. It can also be an opportunity that presents itself. So it may not be the actual money coming in. It can look like an opportunity to make more money, to change your finances in some way. So that is all 12 signs, all 12 rising signs. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments, or you can go to my website. There will be a link for that. If you would like to make an appointment for an individual session with me, we can go over just your chart and how this eclipse will be affecting just you. Be safe, take good care of yourself, get a lot of rest during this time. Eclipses, even if they bring good things, just can be really draining. So give yourself a break, be gentle with yourself. And I will see you in a couple of days, and we'll talk about the lunar eclipse. Be good to yourself, and I'll see you soon.